당도 어단 신바 시제스 나기싱도 당보 하는 체델의 신바 신의 처바미 세 don다데 카레람나다 아주 체디기 내려 롱주 아노코 차산리아 아니 지기 제바 진발 배야고르서 제바 델레 차바기 제바 진바디다 진바이나 내가도 개와 치마 원디오 고방 두투에게 취념는 제투고 말레스 된자디 진교 말레스 어두셔다 don다라디 갑랑 아주 냠네 가르쳐버려 제거라서는 제사다 세디기 취템제 류당 아주 그 내롱주 가리네 기지 집에 신체에 메다바레 제사 남지스네 매바 차로 그래 나야 시루 그래 제사다 되네자 시나 매반 두고 말에 는 개와 치마지 개와린 거래 제사다 개와 치마들라 개와레세텔랑 안로단 텐로이마도요 말에 되네자다 난돌에 개와는 아니 강아 망보요래 제사디에자 텐로 하당 원주미 고바도 토바이나 엔텐델라 하나 지게 강아를 여배나 강아시야 탑라 야바다 디기주야 망아 여발 제사 텐델랑 저기 하나 달바다 템지 김벨 남냠네 가래 제나 제투에게 된 개발진체래 디자다 개와치망 손들레 타르체 아니 개와치망 원료 고바 토벌쇼 선비게 토벌 지긴 선비 군이라 삼로 군어 되네시게 아니 디토베 치르도 아니 릉아 이순이 제된비 수름 녀바 지금에 선비 수름 소야 내 소수게 달 류롱주 토네 샹리야 아니 권절을 최고 후에다 샹리야 진바 땅기 선비 되네게 삼발로 자야 되네 신이 녀바라 소바다 되네게 좀바 이나야 될래야 콩로랑 제파 뇌바 지기 인선비 삼로 떼자오기 지금에 선비 삼 서버코미야 아니 어두 삼다 되네 아니 되네게 냠네 개회 냠네 제 빼야보래 되네 무디제 지긴 선비게 되네게 존주의 삼다데 도신의 삼다데랑 아주 당보디 레 당보 도신의 장호를 해서지 그래서 당보디네 이마
Good morning. So we come to our final session for this retreat. So let's recap looking at the four clingings that we are to part from. So the first we looked at was that of clinging to this life. So clinging to this life refers to clinging to things such as our various relationships, possessions, and so forth, a reputation, and so forth, and seeing these as a source of happiness worthy of striving for. But the reality is, the happiness we desire can never be attained by what we believe actually can do so. So we need to reflect that these are not sources of lasting happiness. And moreover, this life, which will end, we will need to leave everything behind. Our dearest friends, our most beloved family members, our most cherished possessions, all will have to be left behind. All that we can take with us are the imprints that we acquired in this life. The negative imprints that we acquired in order to gain things for this life, as well as virtuous imprints. Those imprints alone are what will accompany us to our next life. So here the meditation is first to come to recognize the actual situation that we find ourselves in as presented, and then as an antidote to this, to gain a perspective that is more in accordance with reality, we need to reflect on impermanence. And this reflection on impermanence is the foundational meditation for someone who longs to cultivate paths within, recognizing that all that we grasp at so, cling at so, is impermanent. Therefore, it cannot lead to the happiness we desire. Moreover, this life that we cling to so, this body that we value so, this too is impermanent. It will have to be left behind. This whole precious environment we have created for ourselves will be left behind. So we meditate on both the impermanence of this life and impermanence in general. And that serves to enable us to lift our gaze beyond the pleasures of this life to looking at the stream of lives that lie ahead of us and see them as of more importance. In this way, we let go of this life's troubles and concerns, this life's pleasures and problems, seeing them as insignificant compared to the stream of lives before us. Then we can focus on accumulating the causes that are required to ensure excellent rebirths for lifetimes to come. These are ethical restraint, where one commits to bringing no harm to others, to keep one's physical behavior within the confines of what's ethical, one's speech within the confines of what is ethical, and even one's mind. So through our body, speech, and mind, we commit to bringing no harm. Secondly, that of generosity. Not only do we commit to not bringing harm, we commit to being of benefit in accordance with our capacity wherever we can, whether through material support or giving up our time, friendship, sharing our skills, and so forth. Third training is that of patience. Because the reality is, whilst trying to interact with others in a way that doesn't cause harm, they may well respond to us in ways that we find uncomfortable. So here, the practice of patience is ensuring the mind stays undisturbed in the face of adversity from others, as well as adversity we may feel when practicing generosity, for example. Others may want to take advantage of us, take us for granted. Again, patience is by keeping the mind undisturbed. And then fourthly, that of enthusiastic perseverance. Intentionally generate delight in the virtue that one is engaging. So these are the four causes to cultivate in order to gain a stream of excellent rebirths.
Onda denegi rimba tangbo de tsetile na choba me denegi songbe di nya songbe da ngan zu nyamnen che rimba tangbo de samla do chen lo jang go re se. Da denegi lo jang chewe chele ya dene an lo di yarge ngan zu nyamnen ma so rimba la yarge chin ho du an di chele kar song sa kamsum la shin na nge ju mi se di odi gu da la jang go re se. Da di do na jang da de ka re se ne da de shi 먼저 가성의 동화 삼반나 신진에 가성의 동화체 디가라다 다다 밀리케와 렘바이나야 동화 바도메바요 강아 유데베다 안에지게 디메제 할래야 감고말하다 감숨지 되바다 수다 수메 강도 깨바이나 레다 녀모 옹의 기회 친절라 안에지게 동화 교회 동화 캬바 되지기 동화 동화기 동화라서 만나서 여바다 되네 안에지게 데베된 주베 미데베 동화 안에 데베 동화 주바디다 제위 동화 도시네 삼다제 안에 도시네 제산다 감숨레 타올레다 녀모옹의 주에 깨와 렘바딜레데 타고도 레다 녀모옹의 깨와 감숨 강도 깨와 렘바나 강아다 동화 라신제샤 지다 띵이 대화도 톱민도 동화레 타르민도 선배게 델레 타르두게 삼바게 동화 타르 타고도 선배 삼바게 디네 델레 타지는 가르쳐서네 안 타르베고 뭐 도고도 스타바스야 돼. 녀모바 빵비게 빵바 타르바 토바이나 디네 동화자오기네 야야 말이 띵이 대화네 대화만 동화 자오기네 야 민도아스 제자다 타르베고 완마도네 탑민도 셈비게 디네 타르베고 뭐 돈얘기 코와라 괜다 디네 델레 타르네 타르베고 토고도 셈베 타르디 군노디다 군노디디체 나디네 타르베고 군노기네 다 타보고 뭐 토비 칠도 안에 가르쳐 왔으면 다 내지 주바나 유명한 승리 주든 몇 수rim송이야 지면 냠내지 수변 냠내지 존재 냠내지야지 네가 하나다 삼대기 등에진 주신의 주비야 되지 되네 다음에 봐도 변념업이 념다 다음에 봐도 베시랍 대파 공기 주제 되니 디콤발레 공고레스 디콤발레 되는 타바토고레스 안디로 장 이바디다 두신로 장고레스 어디 좀 이바디리 와다
This training thus presented to abandon clinging to this life is the indispensable foundation upon which one can build the qualities that follow, the qualities that are thereafter required. This foundational practice of meditating on impermanence gives one the strength of mind, the focus to let go of what dominates us, dominates our mental and physical activity, enabling us to have the strength of mind to cultivate the great qualities that are required for liberation and enlightenment. So, with such a foundation of reflecting well on impermanence and seeing the trials and tribulations of this life in their truer light, one is then ready to build on this and look at the second clinging that is to be abandoned, and that is to the three realms of samsara. So to abandon our clinging for the three realms of samsara, one needs to come to gain a realistic understanding of the realms of samsara. So in the prior meditation, one has done so in relation to this life. Now we need to expand it to gain complete clarity that nowhere in the human, in a rebirth as a human or as a god, is there a state of lasting happiness. There's nothing worthy of striving for that within the realms of samsara that will fulfill our wishes, that will lead us, that will fulfill our yearning for happiness. So this is done through meditating on the sufferings of samsara. Here the presentations are varied, and I mentioned some of them. Reflect on the suffering of physical and mental pain, the suffering of transient happiness, and the suffering of all-pervasive conditioning, as well as meditating on meeting the unwanted, being separated from the wanted, not getting what you want, as well as insatiability and uncertainty. So these are a number of ways in which to come to recognize our actual reality, that there is, despite yearning for happiness, there is no lasting happiness to be found as long as we remain bound in cyclic existence. So this then leads us to develop a disenchantment for cyclic existence entirely. And just like with the foundational meditation one previously presented, there one gains a disenchantment with striving for this life's pleasures. Here, one gains a disenchantment for striving for any result in samsara. And just like with the foundational meditation, where the result was not just disenchantment, but a positive looking to the future, to lives beyond this, here too, with abandoning the second clinging, there is a disenchantment, a rejection, but also a positive embrace of what is possible, the attainment of liberation from samsara, complete cessation of suffering, liberation from the suffering realms of samsara in their entirety. And this is the mind of definite emergence, or more commonly translated as renunciation, where what one is renouncing is the causes of suffering. And one is embracing the causes of happiness, which will lead to lasting happiness of liberation. So those causes of happiness are the same four that were presented in the previous segment, but now with a motivation, now conjoined with the motivation of definite emergence. So these are generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and enthusiastic perseverance. And the two additional trainings of single-pointed concentration and the wisdom realizing selflessness. So these 6 trainings conjoined with the motivation of definite emergence.
Already comes from Leshi, Asian language means a deep of Sepeta, Yamnan Cherry, Kiwu Tinda, Tuma Lamji Jimbo, Lochaya, that Jimbo Nibadi Chango, Ejere. The Rimbo Sumba did on the Kasan Shiva, Doubting Leshin, Chassi Mens, did that Kasan to Shiva, she's not that deeper, Jimbo Yabo Chance, Jelia, and that Karjan, Karsam Dongers in it, just a rang Jeba, Rang Lecha, Rang Jeb, Yaporis, Rang Jeba, Samlo Tea, and another. Digi Yahoo Malaysia, Rashanical Nugores, she's a decent tank of Malaysia. Dine Zada Karjosana, that the Jing cousin on the Dungali drove to come some Koi Dunga, Rang, Dele drove to Samba down to that. That part sim somebody part Kadi part Simjan accusation. The Rang said the Chikre, Shen said the Simjan Tayapachire, Chesada, Shen said the bear Ranglia, Jin Chimbo, and Getting Chimbo, Chesa Rangi Digida, Xian Dang, Garachi Chungan, Shanlatin, Yungur, Chesa Shendi, Malaya, Chimbochidan, Ye Chimbo, Getting Chimbo, Resha, Chesada Rang Deva Dubanaji, Shan, Shan Simjan, Deva Dugore, Ma, Dunga Medupan, Simjan, Tamji, Dunga Meduba, Chesa Dineza, Simjan Tamji, and Digida Dengu, and Big, Denigi, Shan Chimbo. Rangli Giechmo, Pandochimo, Tony, Tone, Shen, Simjan Tamji, Dewa, the Temper Show, Sembigeda, some of those Chayare, Dijelia, and Simjan Dunga, the Jawa Show, some of Chayaje. Dine Dijane, Dine Simjan Dewa, the Tembata, Dunga, the Oda, Nichio, who do me, Pando, Judo, Consocanga, the Ni Sigin Sembigeda, Ningdol Mason, the Cherokee, Dine, Comjin Deza, Ni Simjan Tamjele, Digi. Dunga Tamje says, Sanya Sala Guigin, Sembig, Samlor Tushin, Ningdop, Lasamro Chicomgores. Di gomne dine da sangye saloko simjala pando rubola dade chala ngala ya jik tungin kaya tsang mindu nuba mindu tienza da di nuba de simjala tamje dunga siye che sangye saloko tu nuba de su du sangye horang la dus che sangye le nuba chasang du tienza nga sangye goba shendue punsun sobo zhuya le ya pando zhuya le ya sangye goba matubne tab mindu tienza nga sangye goba toba jigi sangye goba toba sho sembe samdaya de janju sem gom ya res janju sem se ya res 가상의 디바도 쉬버 지자디 이제는 자다 디 삼노디다 두치네 장고를 해서 지자 다된 레신에 자세 미세디 디던다 님보데 두치네 공고를 해서 로장수 숨바디 두치네 쉬버량.
So the first line, which we looked at on Friday, this is from the presentation in the Lamrim, are the trainings or the practices shared with the practitioner of initial capacity. And then the second line, what just recapped from the Lamrim presentation, is the training shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. And then the third line that we looked at yesterday, these, from the Lamrim perspective, are the trainings that are unique to a practitioner of great capacity. So with all three of these trainings, one comes about independence on the successful cultivation of the prior training. Moreover, each training has the aspect of rejecting something, striving for the pleasures of this life, or striving for the pleasures that are still bound anywhere in samsara, as well as they have a aspect of a striving for something new, of something positive, excellent rebirths in future lives, liberation from samsara. So both a rejection and an embrace. Now too, as we move independence on the successful training in these now two foundational practices, one is ready to move to the third training. And here, or the third level, here one now has a very vivid understanding of the pervasiveness of suffering in cyclic existence. One no longer is deceived by the so-called pleasures of samsara, thinking that they are worth my effort. And this means one has rejected cyclic existence and is striving in those six causes to gain liberation. Now one lifts one's gaze yet further, recognizing that I want to be happy, and I now know how to gain lasting happiness. I am striving to cultivate these causes. This puts me in quite a unique position in our world, because what I have in common with all other beings is this yearning for happiness. But so few are in the position that I am in, having come to recognize the pervasiveness of suffering and its causes and how to gain freedom. And I'm actually striving for this. I'm incredibly fortunate. How can I continue to strive for my own welfare alone and leave all other beings behind? How can this be appropriate? So as we move to the third step, hopefully it's abundantly clear how this has come about independence on the second, and hopefully it is also abundantly clear how that only comes about independence on the prior training in the first. So here, one now builds on this burgeoning sense of responsibility to others by first developing affectionate love for all others. And this is done through the meditation on recognizing our deeply interdependent relationship with others. How all that we have and enjoy and that has brought benefit to us has come about not through our own heroic efforts, but in dependence on the kindness of others, where they have directly as well as indirectly helped me in countless ways since beginningless time. We use this, reflecting deeply here on interdependence, to develop a tender, affectionate love for others. Thereafter, based on that, we develop into the actual love of the Dharma. The wish, may all beings attain lasting happiness. May they abide in lasting happiness. And this is followed by the companion mind of compassion. May all beings be freed of suffering and its causes. And we develop love and compassion in this way so that this yearning becomes so powerful within that we are no longer satisfied with merely wanting this to happen, but we are going to make it happen. We take individual responsibility for the welfare, not just of myself, but of each and every single mother sentient being without exception. We take it as our responsibility to ensure each being is guided so that they gain liberation from suffering in the same way that I am progressing. This is my responsibility, and this is the mind of wholehearted resolve. Then, one further wish is added to that. As I lack the capacity to do so, I have to become a Buddha. It's only as a Buddha will I have the skill to be able to lead all beings to enlightenment. So here one generates bodhicitta, these two wishes of wanting to lead all beings to a state freed of suffering, and to do so, I must become a Buddha. So that's as far as we came to yesterday, the cultivation of bodhicitta. In the third line, if you cling to self-interest, you are not a bodhisattva.
Dini gello janye rimba de du she dangbo da 저기 양어 되고 뭐 토비 치르도 군예랑 군령 디토네 진배냠네 진바소 님네 제제 이바디 딜로 야고 장체위 제야다 데네야 아니 미바 데네 야체를 따제 감성 코위 타달에 드레제 탈바토부도 셈페 삼다 된 탈바토비게 된다라야 니지솔라서 바냠네 제들이 번이바 데네게 냠는데 야고 절로 장제 내 야고 차야도 데네 안에 셈제 담제 코위 동안에 저고도 셈페 삼다제 데네 잠니지 검제 아니 사서가 자주셈 이게디 도스로 자야디 림반 마서나 도스제네 장고고를 가서 뒤수 유캔다 데네기 뒤여바데절에 도스제네 아주 냠네 제고고 림바데네래 안절로 자야 림바데 당보데지 당보 시선 기부 중요함이 림바로 자다지 마서 개와치 먹는데 고방 토베 등일 제제 아니 디던달라 진바 수줌라서 바냠는 제고그래 당보디 수로자 디 야고 차서는 되네 야고 차 냠는데 어디 야고 차도 되네 딜레야 개체 당제 감소 코베 동아 탈라 저제 타바 토구도 선비게 도시는 삼다 되네 토베 던달라 진바도 수줌라서 부도시는 냠는 제고 장고그래 디 야고 냠는 제 야고 차선도 되네 신에는 샘제 탐제는 동아를 저고도 코베 동아 탈라 저고도 심 삼다제 되네 되네 샘제 탐제기 던달라 잠니제 이곰 사상곰 되네 장셔셈 도스진제 로자이 림바도스에 냠는제 림바도스는 냠는 제고래 림바데 제자디라 두수 유나 딩어도 냠는 제고래 제자 두수 의네스 냠는 림바도스 제고래 두수다 도요 두수면에 제마 말와다 되자.
So I hope it's abundantly clear that there is a progression in training, that the later developments come about in dependence on the successful cultivation of the prior trainings. There is a specific sequence. And for those who have two aspects, firstly, the aspiration to develop the higher qualities of the path, and they have some time, then the way to train, to develop those higher qualities, is to cultivate excellently the prior trainings and move through the sequence. So for those who have aspiration for the higher qualities and have the time to go through the whole sequence, make great effort where you are. And for most, this will be to train in the first line, so as to develop the strength of mind required to engage in the second level. Because the trainings you would have heard differ in terms of the motivation to be cultivated, where one is looking, or what one is looking to reject. The distraction to this life's meaningless pleasures, the distraction to striving for anywhere in cyclic existence, maybe distraction is not the right word, but the self-interest in the third level, that is all to be abandoned. So there's difference. But where it's very similar is in terms of what is conjoined to that motivation. So for the training of the being of initial capacity, the first level, there it's ethics, generosity, patience, and enthusiastic perseverance. Then when one comes to the training of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, it's the same four trainings. ethics, generosity, ethics, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, and then 2 additional trainings of concentration and wisdom. So by the time one has developed that foundation, one is already skilled in those first 4 trainings. They are a part of who you are. Your mind is restrained ethically, restrained from the afflictions and so forth, making the newer trainings of concentration and wisdom much easier to actually cultivate. And then, independence on that foundation, one moves to the trainings of being of great capacity, where it's the exact same 6 trainings, but here the motivation is completely different. It's that of bodhicitta. They are now conjoined with bodhicitta.
데 타마 차바 쳔비기 냠내지나 심자 탐조 고회 동안을 저고도 제사다 심자 탐질의 디기 주고도 제사다 심대와 되바 동안에도 지바레스 제사 감정 고회 동안 타달을 저고도 심배 삼다제 된 심자 탐질라 안잠바 잠보 고미하다 심자 탐질 동안다 잔나님이 이제곰 되네 심자의 동안 자다 지게 된바데 내치기 심비기 라삼곰 되네 니던달랑의 심자 탐질도 산요고바 토바쇼 심비기 어두신 삼당 곰고레서 도시는 니네니네리아 되네게 강토도 제투야디 야고레디 제고레서지 가상이 쉬바레 되네 디슈에디레 제자디 슈에디 가르스는 저기 되네기 따짐바 당법에 뒤서링보 고미하다 니바 고미하다 뒤서데 말하나 되네 타마디 곰션에 약효책으로 와다 고되니 이걸로 자야 되지바이나 제상 감노 고르 동안 타달래 아니 Nyingpo meba tongyodu, ane nga sole Nyingpo meba tong kamzugu dunga tadal tong tongkorwa, jisa semja tamjo korwe dunga la jara samdangyodu dini jidiyore, jisa dusi nga zo, da dini samdangya yagore, seti kaya nga sang mi namyune kasana kenyidi, da tamadili ya nga zo samdo dusi tangkore, jangkore, seti tamage da dishubare, janshu sim kyaba chenpyoge, dine janshu sim kiyaba da nyamle jita rinpade, odu jetune yagore, sesu shubadire, dagasina, 안들 뒤세당 고갑다 차산 림바지 자이디 말아වෙ나 도시엔 디셰신에다 약속 차기로 와.
I'd imagine for perhaps all of you, because you have the karmic imprints to come to a place like this, to join a retreat like this, you have imprints that mean when you hear about some of the goals of the Dharma, in particular those such as bodhicitta, or the wisdom realizing emptiness, or perhaps karma abiding, these kinds of goals of the Dharma, when you hear about them, a deep yearning arises. This is the ripening of your imprints from past lives, where you are attracted to this. So my advice for you, in terms of your daily practice going away from here, is have an honest look at yourself and your capacity in terms of time, available time. For those who have more time, meditate in the sequence of trainings. Focus on the first until you gain transformation, then to the second, and then when you gain transformation, the third. So in the Lamrim, it's presented very clearly the signs of when you have completed the first level and ready for the second, and so forth. So for those who have more time, that is this sequence of training is how you will actually get realization. For those who look at the day and say, I will make time to do meditation, but I'm not going to be able to have it as the dominant activity in my mind throughout the day. That's where I am right now. That's how things are right now. Then what I suggest to you is the meditation I presented yesterday. Do this meditation. Don't go through all the stages because it will just take too much time. So meditate on what I presented yesterday, the sufferings of samsara, giving rise to a wish of, I want to be free of the sufferings of samsara. And then immediately go to bodhicitta. So too do all others. And then you go into the interdependence to develop a sense of affection for others, and then meditate on love, compassion, wholehearted resolve, and bodhicitta. Meditate. So yesterday I presented this meditation in detail. Do that. These imprints will be gaining in strength, will be nourished. And when your opportunity in life changes and you have more time so that you can focus not just to a daily meditation, but throughout your day, keep the topics of the Dharma dominant in your mind. Then, with those strong imprints, you'll be ready to start at the first level and will progress much more quickly to the second, third, and so forth. So this is my advice to you on how to meditate on what you've learned this week. You decide where in these two camps you find yourself, and then you place your attention there in one of these two meditation techniques.
dine da jam ni ji se khasan yuen den phun so ba da yuen den tham ji shi re se de khasan shu cha ba le da dine na da sin dang an zhe ge da gong long la ma san da sim je tham je ge don da la san yu go ba to ba shu se be jan ju sem de da khasan gong long ti re da di tho ne an zhe ge wa nyam len jia xiao gong long je sa dine ge jan ju sem ti da ge wa na ne ge wa chi shu de re so da je sa da ge wa chi shu de 전주 셈세데 전주 셈세데 그래서는 체도 저와 셈전 탐지기 된다라 아니 성고래 톱자 안에 그래서 타둑 산지 고반 토바지고래 제가 디 삼로디레 개체와지 묘 말해지래 제가 디레 아니 개와 체와지 용고 말해 제가 전주 셈 마세 개와 침보래지 제가 디네 인자 저기 근데 별마선에 디송을 제가 ben에 녀만에 제 세르규르기 지세지 요르서데 세르규르 투예기 제지 요르서도 디자를 발루션 자자 세르규르 두고래 세지 녀마 된지 요르선 근데 별을 숨거 공부르기 된지 요르스 제가 디 아는 아주 가서래 세규 지세 나데데 데니기 베티나진 세규기 지나신디 세규 지디 시자 같을 주 차선 세르 자도 고래세 제가 디나신디 and the segi zinashi de chanchu semdi res chesa chanchu semdi nyamnen chebaina gewa gartubene sanjo gobon to be gychagi res chesa da sungore denege segi zinashi res de chanchu semdi za chimbo shui res de sungore.
So just before I translate what Genla said, in case I don't think I emphasized one key point enough of what Genla was saying in that previous segment, where the dividing line for each person is in terms of where to meditate, is if one has enough time in the day to keep one's mind focused on the Dharma, start with the first level until that's accomplished. Where one doesn't have the opportunity to keep the Dharma at the forefront of one's mind throughout the day, then do the meditation as presented yesterday. And in this way, you build up the qualities inside so that when the time comes, when you can focus on the Dharma primarily, then you're ready to go to starting at the first level. Now to come to what Genla said. So yesterday we came up to the cultivation of bodhicitta, the generation of bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. And this, amongst the various motivations behind virtuous activities, there's none that can compare to bodhicitta. Whatever one does with a virtuous motivation leads to the accumulation of merit. But if that virtuous motivation is one of bodhicitta, the merit is incalculable, inestimable. And this can be understood through these 2 points. The goal of the bodhisattva is to benefit each and every single being without exception. So, therefore, there is no greater objects to benefit than that. It's an inconceivable number. It's not just myself. It's not just my loved ones. It's everyone equally so, feeling a closeness to all equally. And then the second reason is that the goal that the bodhisattva has is not a good rebirth. It's not their individual liberation. It's Buddhahood. There is no greater goal to strive for, and there are no greater number of beings to benefit. Therefore, that motivation accumulates the greatest amount of merit. And in one of Nagarjuna's texts, Shantideva, in the Bodhisattva's way of life. He uses the analogy of bodhicitta being like an elixir that can transform metal into gold. So when bodhicitta arises in our heart in a way that is uncontrived and lasting, our mind is transformed from something ordinary into the most precious of minds. This is bodhicitta. And with such a mind, then, whatever one does is virtuous. And it's not merely virtuous, it will lead to the greatest accumulation of merit possible. This is the unique characteristic of bodhicitta.
Inaya Ludi and the Kiji Kazana Nena Zambo Yoba, Kiji Kuatoshe, the Niki Rede, Mizan Ludi in the Shilang, the Inaya, Manzu Din Telia, Antic, Janjusim, Yamlin J, and the Chig Passion Sanjo Komato Yamlin Cheba Ina, the Niki Tubaina, Della Dene, and Kiji Sanji Yuku, and Rinjin. Rinpoche Rinjin Rinhar Meba, Nashin Sanji Kudi Trup 2 waters, Jeza, the Nigin Janju Semdi, and the Jig by the Jig Bezuche, Dimbuchin, and the Kedina Dinam and Jewores, as Sungore.
The way this elixir of bodhicitta works is that it arises in our mind that is contained within this body of flesh and blood, this body that is subject to the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death. But with this elixir in our heart, this body now has the required cause to be transformed into the flawless body of a Buddha. This is how the elixir of bodhicitta works for our body.
Sergio Zi number Cho Dabu and Junjunala Suda Japan that sitting the Dunda DJ Capsa that sitting my Russian Dido, and then Mizan Ludi Lan and Jayugo, Rinjinda Meba, Urana, and the Janchup, Semshe Shawa, Reptin Sung Saji. The Sung to Jazan Janjusing Payan, the Janjusem the dinner, Janjusem Donala, Janjusem the Sergio Zina Shere. As Ludile, the Niki Nena, the Denish Long Yorte, Inea, the Janjusem, the Kunil, Janjusem, the Yamlenje, those Kunil and Yamlen Cheva Ina, Delatine, Chodukuba, Sanji Kova, the top 2 says, Ringin, Dele Chodukuba, Ringin Nameba, Sanji Kudi, top 2 says. Deni that Janjusem, the Niki Tachimbo, Janjusem, the Yamlen, the Mutiche, Dimbuche, Yamlenche, what says, the night is more. That's all.
The verse from Shantideva's Bodhisattva's Way of Life, again, is quoting from the first chapter, where Shantideva, for about 30 verses, presents the incredible benefits of bodhicitta, so as to moisten the imprints we have and give rise for the yearning to train in the way guided, so that eventually we too become counted amongst bodhisattvas. So this particular verse, the 10th verse, like the finest gold-making elixir, from this unclean body we have taken to a body of a Buddha, a priceless jewel is transformed. Such is bodhicitta, thereby hold it absolutely steadfast. So here this term, a priceless jewel, refers to this mind that the bodhisattva has, this mind of bodhicitta, that can transform this unclean, very ordinary body into the perfect body of a Buddha. Therefore, Shantideva concludes in the verse, hold it, the mind of bodhicitta, absolutely steadfast. Protect this most precious of jewels.
Diba mangbo sayor. Jeza da diba ma sayale, diba shayale ya, ane nga zuge gewa chubiyage tabla mangbo yore. Yine da janjusim gomba na shinjine, diba shatuye, niba janjusim na chi yomare sor. Jeza denegi diba topchin, shindu miseba, deni nzobe janjusim mimbe, ane geshen gangi zilyu numi gyurus. Jeza janjusim na chi yomare. Janjusim gomba yina, deni diba 디바 가르사 여바네 야마 가르사바네 자주심 곰두 디바디바 다투고레스 제산 개와 셴달야 자주심 나신 디바 다투에 디바요 마레스 제자다 게 자주심 곰고레스 된 제자 나중에 야마기 디바 가르사 여바네 자주심 곰바네 디바 다투고레스 제자 자주심게 판연되네 요레스지 판연 송고로 디아디로와 리우당바나 전주 리우당보레 디버지 디버신도 아니 디버 덥신 신도 미세바 세지 대년 조배 장수 신민바 계신 관계 세균을 미요스
There's a further verse which I'm not finding now, again from the same chapter, about how in order to attain enlightenment, not only does one have to accumulate incredible qualities, which bodhicitta is the most powerful motivation to lead to the accumulation of virtue, bodhicitta also is the most powerful antidote to past non-virtue. It purifies immense amounts of non-virtue. So here in the qualities of bodhicitta that Shantideva praises in the 30th verse, in the first verse, he praises bodhicitta not only as being the greatest of motivations for the accumulation of virtue, but that it also leads to the purification of extensive non-virtue.
고위 동화 타들 규현다 고위 동화 타들 조고도 대랑 마마 현심자 탐지 조고도 심배 삼다제데 심자를 미배 잠바콤 대내 니조콤 대내 하섬 심자 탐지 동화다 자와다 되게 주변에 니치긴 세베게 다 대내게 하섬 니톱게 대내게는 심자 탐지 동화세야 된 되게 주변에 탈럼 조데 상지 고바 마톱나다 민도 제사 탑여셔 상지에 된정에 심자 탐지 상지 고바 토버쇼 심배 지긴 심배 군어디 야 장주심게디 가산디바도 한테 뒤슈사 연 장주심게 판연되는 요아서 디스바 도슈바레.
So we got yesterday as far as building on the meditation of the sufferings of samsara and the generation of definite emergence, to recognizing all others are in the same position as ourselves in yearning for happiness, but are bound for the same reasons as us, and are, even though they may not know it, are desperate to be guided to gain their own freedom. Here one then meditates on the interdependent relationship we have with others, this deep entwined relationship we have with others, that all that we have that's good has come about in dependence on others. Therefore, one develops a sense of tenderness, of closeness, of dearness towards others. Based on that, then, we can develop actual love and compassion for them, wholehearted resolve, and bodhicitta. When bodhicitta arises within oneself, it's abundantly clear there is nothing that is important except for becoming a Buddha in order to ease the suffering of others. This becomes the guiding light of one's life, striving to benefit others in order to become a Buddha, in order to help them ever more. So that's as far as we came yesterday.
안다디 네 군로 전주 심제 탐지상 요고바 토바 지긴 심비 군로 전주 심데 데니게 군네 라세베젤라 다산지 고바 토베슈 냠len 제가 가르쳐 오래래네 다 진바 수좀 쇠바 전주 섬데 셰라 다디 가산 주바나 이디레 군로 전주 심비 군네 라르마 냠len 제디 진바 지바 차되로 제사다 진바시데 류롱제 계속다 지바심 다 심제 탐지게 되는 게 상여도 토바 지긴 지난당한 상지 고바 토비 치르도 하는 게 류롱제 계속 탐지샤리야 권절의 추보부에다 시행 심제는 바탕기 샘비게 다 진배 냠len 제들이 데네 아니 데네 류 심제 탐지 상지 고바 토고도 디인자 네 류가 이순요근에 샬러 뇌베 자와 체외 자와서 자와 있는 지금에 샘비게다 제다 랑든게 랑기 돈다 삼도도 균에 땅에 샘비 삼다이들이다 누스체는 송해야 돼 자와 수좀 송해야 돼 서버 고미야서야 돼다 내가 저기 생기 뇌바로 가르치베네 샬러 뇌서 제베네 소소게 파 코로나지 코로나 뇌len지 매 샘비 삼다이데 서버 고미야래 내 서버 삼 데네게 애능이 샬레 판도르 기회냠네 제바데 강할 마우스까지 강할 가지 여바능이 땅 강할 당도len지 아니 냠len지 기세베 삼다이데 서베 냠len지 도체네서 된 준비해야 되네. 안늘 차상 람 가르치는 게 무디지 빼약보래 무디디 제에서 제게 가신 조신 네 삼나 다도 준비하고래 되네 아니디 제래야 네 진에 띵에진 신내 주비야래 되네 신내 주비야 되야나 다음에 봐도 배 전유쌤 공대 개인님의 제배네 연모모 방바라 니보 동반이 도비 다음에 봐도 비셔라도 공고거래 대연사데 다음에 도 비셔라 공제디 다 냠내제 군론 전유쌤이 군내 라마도 다 냠내 제디 진보 수준 쇠버 준비 삼제 셔럽세데 가상 괜히 쉬바나신다 냠내 제디래
When bodhicitta arises, that it is the determination to lead all sentient beings to their own liberation from suffering, and to do so, I must become a Buddha. With that having arisen within one will then strive to cultivate the causes that lead to both being able to help others ever more, and in particular, to become a Buddha, so that one can help others in the greatest of ways. So what are then the trainings that the Bodhisattva engages in? Well, these are those same 6 practices that one trains in with a mind of definite emergence. But here, the motivation has been transformed from one of, I have to gain freedom from suffering, to one, I have to lead all beings to freedom from suffering, and therefore, I have to become a Buddha. So the motivation is completely transformed, but the practices are the same 6. But the same 6 now have an additional name attached to it, because those same practices are the mind of, say, generosity is now conjoined with bodhicitta. So it's called the perfection of generosity, because of being conjoined with bodhicitta, it will lead to arising in a perfected way in a Buddha. So here the practitioner will, as before, train in generosity, giving of themselves, making offerings to the Buddhas, repaying their kindness, strengthening their connection, making offerings to suffering beings to ease their suffering, strengthen their connection, and that of ethical restraint, which here is primarily guarding their mind from self-interest. That is the primary training, because by the time the practitioner has generated bodhicitta, they have extensive experience of these 6 practices, so they are become ever more refined. Then the training on patience is ensuring one's mind stays undisturbed when one receives adverse reactions from others, as well as adverse reactions from one's own inner turmoil. In particular, fatigue in training, feeling this is too difficult. Being patient with that, not letting this afflicted way of thinking hinder one's motivation. And the fourth training, enthusiastic perseverance, so taking delight in virtue. And then those 2 additional trainings from the prior section, single-pointed concentration, and the wisdom realizing selflessness, or the wisdom realizing emptiness. So here again, it's the same 6 trainings as before, that the new bodhisattva has great experience in, but now are conjoined with bodhicitta.
다 냠는 제디래. 대자당 저기 직타마들 zemachuna tawa mi sedi di yunda zo khasan khenyi ga de dorde chi ba shubare da dirin ya de din ma di ko ran zo de ski she na song ju na ya bodo.
And the final line I addressed earlier when the trainings of the practitioner of intermediate capacity, because for a practitioner striving for their own individual liberation, they too need to abandon grasping. So we look then in brief at if grasping arises, you do not have the view, the 4th line. But we'll look at that more now, because it's also a key training for the bodhisattva.
rāshīngi chūpa cīmbā, chēsā tā chē dēmbā chūpa cīmbī dēnzīn chī sīgōrā tā dēmbā chūpa cī dēnzīn, tā ngā rāshīngi chūpa cīmbī cīmbā dāsīn sīgōrā tā, dēnī kī dēmbā chūpa cīmbī cīmbā rōchī, dēnī kī cīmbā namdō cīmbā tī yōpa yīnā, dā mē pā tā tūgō mā rē lā rōwa, dēnī yīnsā tā dēnī kī cīmbā tī dogo mar tezadi dotko di tomatona nyomo panto mares dine sanyu ko to mares je inji mijida dame be tawa an kaso anjin ma to tomba yi to hore su sungore
Here, so that the fourth line, if grasping arises, so what one grasps at is the self as being self-existent, the mind as being self-existent. In fact, everything that exists, we grasp at it as being self-existent. So this is the ignorance of self-grasping. It's also called the ignorance of true grasping. And without abandoning this ignorance, we will not be able to eradicate the afflictions, because it is the very root cause of the afflictions. And without being able to eradicate the afflictions, liberation and enlightenment cannot be achieved. Therefore, it has to be trained in by both the practitioner seeking individual liberation and the practitioner seeking Buddhahood.
Trubduba Zimba Kala, Madio Rango, when you about Zimbi Lodilla, Zimbasi Ore. Chesada, Kala Mado Rango, when you Juba, Kala, Madio Rango, when you Juba Juena, di Demba Jubas or Demba Juban, and then rushing to us at Dilagore. Chesan di Tagara, the Nigga Kala, Mado Rango, when you do Yores and somebody that Zimba tins in this Ore, Zimbasi Ore. That di Doksho, Kala Mado Rango, when you Juba Zagin, your mare, the Nigga Tombare, and the Deniga how can do the Tommy talk with Tawasi or the Tony Tawasi this order. And the third Roshishavana.
So to present the correct view in brief, first, one recognizes that every single object of thought, in other words, everything we think about, everything, whether it's a self, whether it's a particular mind, whether it's something we see or hear or smell, whatever is that object of our consciousness, it appears as if it is self-existent. And we grasp at it as if it is. This is true grasping or self-grasping. But this consciousness is always mistaken, which means nothing exists in the way that it appears to our mind. In other words, every single thought we have is mistaken. We believe that it exists in the way that it appears, but nothing exists in the way that it appears. And when we investigate, we come to recognize it is empty of existing in the way that it appears. And this is the realization of emptiness, the view of emptiness. Nothing exists in the way that it appears. It is all empty of existing in the way that it appears. This is the understanding of emptiness.
Chunju me tenje yu ko sam tang ko jesa di tongpa yi to ba la de ne ge kar sam tang ko sin tenje yu do ne sam tang to ne ma sa to ko re sa da di to ye ge tablam ro so ne sam tang na chyo wa ne kar tang sin tenje yu ko sam tang ko re je.
How to come to know that every object of thought is empty of existing in the way that it appears? Does one come to know emptiness or realize emptiness? The most skillful method is that of dependent arising. There are different ways to present dependent arising. We'll look at it through two ways: being dependent on causes and being interdependent or mutually dependent.
都什么的这部看的些呢，行多呢，咱呢，这些的对没少下路，看呢，可能给语句用过的，语了嘛对吧？的那个给给你没办法的，就是的，就这个点这些我的。
So the first, dependency on causes. Just about everything that we will observe is a result, which means it came about independent on causes. So just about everything we think of has come about, is a result, then therefore it has come about independence on causes.
就是在军这个点这rakpa的个，俺说还过过话的，就是今天在新北这个端到俺这个这部的对吧？那这部的原来端到了，俺的新北这里3번 답点呢，处理都现在caption都现在几个了，就是3번 맞답나这部的用过没把的，俺说还过过话，就是今天在的都现在这部开始过过呢，你有当不嘛3번 답이야啦，说把的都写的俺这个记得呢，有。这部的具体来啥来吧？具体来对个要把的俺这个具体来点的用户要把的，点那个具体个点的rakpa的，这样子好过度过了吧
？And dependency on causes is something that on a course level, a superficial level, we all know and we readily accept. Just ask a gardener if their garden came about independent on the flowers, etc., are self-existent, and they say, no, I did a lot of work. I was a major cause of this garden, amongst many other things, amongst many other causes. So on this coarse, superficial level, we understand dependency on causes.
那的那个你来对差话的，那需要好是成绩把这个兴趣线这个好过来的边的，俺这个3번多的嘛，大现在的这部是如果是几个身边是好过了嘛的，但3번多的那了女把可能是过来设定啊这个这好过头个嘛，这来的差话的没成绩把兴趣线这个的，这个女把点的需要点的用过来这样的好过头过了，但的那个就是的那个跟这个点这个那么下。
A subtler level of dependency, perhaps some gardeners will know, but the majority of us will not know. And that, but will be known by botanists. A botanist will be able to say, yes, from this seed, this plant will grow. But what is it about this seed? So this seed has various components, and when it meets the right conditions, this will happen within the seed, and that will lead to that happening within the seed, and so forth. So botanists will know the inner workings at subtler level of dependence arising.
And the niggy, and do sin that delay chow ya, some done on the Gewanga money, and the Gewati, Gewanga money, ma Gewari said do some to the daily unity dented tower to water, when the Gewanga to Gewa did the medical skill get Gewa, can Skewa and the can skiers and down on the Migawakis and Sulkewas, Amalekewa, Amalekewa candidates, the Maya Rimbush, the Amigdusin, and Savan do Shaje to Skewa as a dibadon of the Shinkurva. That dinner Savan Shan and Dion good cavalier said me, so such high good cavaliers and Kiawangaman, Namshichipa, Dina, Sugar, sang now big to Sonta did this one, just that denegate, Mother said, Gansa Digina, ya, 지난 타마라 먼저 깨왕아마게 될때는 기고 깨왕아마를 기고를 해서 두신다 디수 군지게 남샤 된지게 차와 차라 저거래.
And similarly, if we take this life that we have, we can say, yep, this body, it came about independence on my mum. I was born from my mother. Father played his part as well in my conception. So independence on my parents, this body came about. This, again, course level of understanding of dependency on causes. But then what about our consciousness, our mind? Where did that come from? And there, a course level of dependency is insufficient. A subtler level is required where one understands that this consciousness came from a previous life and then entered into this body and it came about or entered into the body at conception. And therefore, this body has consciousness. It's a consciousness abides in the body. So that understanding of consciousness coming from a previous life, that is a subtler understanding of dependency on causes.
On do some that Jebu can say, you la madeba, and the Jebu, I may have a thing on to get how words, then you let Jebu Chuyama, the Gula Madeba, Rangung into taking that Jebu made water.
So on a coarse, superficial level, we will all readily agree that whatever is a result necessarily came about independent on a cause.
Shen chebu dige ngobo duji ge ruche kari ne shen ji le shen ji le ma de ba je korong ne yo korong rang gu ne drup de ba ji chebu ji yo re sambe samlo de samlo no ru ba da den je ka sen chebu kari ne yu ji le de ne du ko de yu le de ba cha ru wa yu le ma de ba da yu le ma de gang la ma de ba chebu ji yo re le yu le ma de be chebu ji yo re sam ko wa je den yu le ma de be chebu de 다 안주기도 심지도 귤라마데베 제보지 요아미도와 매반자다 귤라마데바 아니 제보지 요레 선배 삼로디 노르샤 록셰 차디거와
And again, with just a little bit of thought, it's very easy to recognize that there's not a single result that is not dependent on a cause. A result necessarily has to have come from a cause. And therefore, if someone who clearly isn't thinking about this will assert that, no, this is self-existent, it does not require a cause, it will be readily easy to disprove that whatever they're referring to is self-existent, exists by way of its own nature. It must have come about independent on a cause. It cannot be independent of causes. So this understanding of dependency on causes is widely accepted, doesn't require much investigation to recognize its validity.
디네제 다티네 답이 틴제세디 카르라네 셴지레 뛰네 답마도 셴지레 마되바 호주예시오 말이지. 비는 알아줄래야 라바 예바도 윤바세디 라바 예바세디 라바 윤바 지여반서 윤바들레 파 뛰치네 예바 차바르마도 지라직마도 메네 베네 기지라 슈구직마도요 말와 슈구직마도 마데 고 주구 라마도 주구 예바도 윤바 기 주구 예바 기 주구 윤바스라기문도와 지가선 기 주구 예바 메바 되가서네 기 주구 윤바 메르와 주구직마도 메도 윤바 메제 되서 메르와 지다 예바라에 메레 지다 디상 안줄라 라바 예바세디 라바 윤바딜레 되네 예바디 샤고레스 지다디 안주 라바 예바도 윤바도 균제 말와 라바 예바 윤바레 되네 기고 유마레 균제 말데 이내하다 안주 라바 예바세디 샤바에 가래라네 아니 윤바 라바 윤바딜레 되네 예바디 샤고레스 지사디 예바 되서 윤바디 메나 예바 샤서 요마레스 디나지 라바 윤바세디야 라바 예바딜레 되네 윤바 차고레스 지사 되네 샤고마데 라바 되서 예바디 메나 윤바세 라요 마레스 지사 라바 예바도 윤세디 예세디야 셴 아니 라바 윤바레 되네 고 예바 샤고 차고레스 라바 윤바세디야 안 라바 예바딜레 셴 라바 예바레 되네 안 라바 예바스 윤바세 차고레스 지사디 되네 답이 된데레스 지사 디네게 찍찍레 되네 안 디나 신다 benang 주기 랑다 현세디 소소리 셴바 주여바자다 아니 랑아레 셴바레 세루다 랑리 셴지 랑르 되네 미디 셴다디 셴세고로 랑르 되네 셴데고로 단 셴바디스 되네 가 랑세수로 저랑 셴세디 찍찍레 되네 샤고레스 디나신 아주 신도로 마서나 베네 아 강보 첨부세야 저라 강보 첨부 춘추세 춘추 메나 첨부스 강보 첨부래라요 말아 진짜 강보 첨부세야디 강보 춘추를 뛰네 샤고레스 강보 춘추세야디 코로나를 채와 강보들을 뛰네 니 춘추 샤고레스 진짜 자산 디스 뛰네 답에 뛰네 샤고레.
The second lens through which we'll approach dependent arising is that of mutual dependency or interdependency. So the Tibetan is literally one thing dependent on another, which is a bit of a mouthful, so I'll rather here use mutual dependency or interdependency. And so this refers to things which do not come about independent on causes, but nevertheless are dependent. So for example, there can only be left if there is right. There can only be large if there is small. So this is an illustration of mutual dependency. One can only talk about a large building if there's an understanding that there are buildings not of the same size, that are smaller. And similarly, left and right. We talk about our two hands, and we say, I have a left hand and I have a right hand. But we can only talk about left and right hands because there are two. For example, if you take your pets at home, you won't talk about your dog or cat's left or right tail because dogs and cats only have one. It would be ludicrous to talk about their right tail or their left tail because they only have one. But if they're their paws, you talk about their left and right paw. So there is this mutual dependency that because there is a left, there is a right. If there were no left, there could not be a right. And similarly, each of us says, I am here. But from the perspective of everyone else in the room, you are over there. So self and other, here and there, this too is mutually dependent. If we were alone in the room, we wouldn't talk about others in the room because you'd be alone in the room. So this then is the second way that we'll look at dependency, this mutually or interdependence.
Shenjile duene ane shaba zhubdiba mato shenjile duene shaba jimato shenjile ma dueba che ne haya ju yune che meba de so zhuyo mare dine zhuyo yo mare dine yo mare so che garina de di chasa ro che garine da dagwa se de midaba duene dagwa sha ro de se dagwa midaba men due yo mare zada ko che gan de xine shenjile due che sha gri ma do shenle ma dueba che haya ma zhubdiba che yo mare.
Through these two ways to look at dependent arising, that of dependency on causes and mutual dependency, one recognizes that everything that exists, everything we think about, every object of thought, is a dependent arising. Whether it's a compounded or uncompounded phenomenon, or to use other terms, impermanent or permanent, it is a dependent arising. Everything that exists dependently.
Ordinary, just a doing to one mother, Jewish mess. Just on the Jewish you would do, Sumia, Jamia, Jimmy, Romeo said, Migme, Naome, Name, Jimmy, like do, just on the Migio by your and to say what Migio do I didn't. Now your one, J. Yorwa, then to say what Honda in a business, Migioma, Nayoma, Jayoma, the Zumashine, Zuma Marwa. She said, Migioma, Nayoma said the color word, Yomar, Karayoma, Lagosan, Shenchila, Matuba, Korong when you do to Migioma. Na said, Shenchila, Matuba, Korong, rang when you do to Nasa Yomar. She said, Dinigi, mean Manan, Madu, Karachi, Yana Matsu. Shenjila Matuba Korong when you droop to into Yomar, it's just that mix the Shen good and can't let in the two quarter. Now said the Shen good and can't let in the Shenjila dinner to quarter. Just a Shenjila dinner to Barmad, Shenjila Matune, as you get Chashe Zivine, can't do Yomares. And just a Yomar said, just a meek man, now I may said this order. She has a meek now at the year. Good and can't Shenjila dinner to Mount Shen, Matune, droop to him, Mika Yoma, now I Yoma, Jayoma, do myself.
This morning, when you're reading the Heart Sutra says many things that without having been taught what is meant, seem very strange. When it says there are no eyes, no ear, and so forth, this seems bizarre because, of course, there are eyes, we're looking at each other, and there are ears, we're hearing sound. But so this will make one think, what was Avalokiteshvara going on about? This makes no sense. But when you understand that it's presented in an abbreviated manner, that what is being said is that there are no independent eyes, no independent ears, and so forth. Rather, they are dependent. Then it makes complete sense. But the sutra is presented in a particularly abbreviated manner. But the meaning for all those no's are that there is no independence, rather, there is only dependence.
On this more, just that the names are the nigger in the Javachen, Chichili thing and Chichili thing, the thing to the netting thing to Sambedu, in the Shimju man, the Shimju Tar, the Ganzam Chilia, or that your condition, Shenjila, Matu Bache, 마 현실의 뛰는 줍도 봐 짱짱이샤 현실의 마디오 봐서 저기는 민도와 선배기 셈리 양해봐 다주든 예바지 용고래.
When one then thinks well, first recognizing that whatever you are taking as your example, whatever the object of thought is, whatever you're thinking about, it appears as if it is independent. So that's how we naturally relate to it. But when you think about it, it is dependent. And when you keep going through this process, you recognize nothing exists in the way that it appears, independent. Everything is dependent. Everything.
언제니 이제 단 나도 삼로 나려야 가려서네 그냥 나세다 가상 그선 괜히 주반 장아도 나세 삼로야 나타로 삼다도 나세디 강라 마도 그런 거니 줍디바 요와시 난고레스 디자 나와 나지 다가라 요레스 비 짐바 산기 징아 주길래 요레스 디나신 당아서 풍보디기나 주부 풍보디기나 즉 그런 두승아서 나나 로레 나에도 풍보세야 그런 현실에 마도 그런 거니 줍디 요와시 난고레스 나와 나신 다가라 요레스 비 짐빌로 산기 지요레스 디솔라 네 덴진시 올 덴진세디 덴진 산기 지요레스 제자디 덴진시스
When I spoke about this a couple of days ago, I mentioned that all phenomena appear as if they are independent. So taking the self too appears as if it is independent, not needing to rely on anything, but being self-existent. The self appears as if it doesn't need to rely on the body and mind. But when we investigate, we recognize actually it is. It's clearly dependent. But that is not how it appears. So the self, like all phenomena, appears as being independent, not dependent. And then we believe it exists in this way. Again, this all happens at an innate level. We are not going through a thought process that in every moment that I exist truly. Rather, at an innate level, we grasp at, in this case, the self, at every phenomenon as existing in the way that it appears, as existing independently.
어디니기 제사다 나주 삼문당사 낭수제 낭술레디 나와나 요레 셈벨 하이 짐바지 제상가 좀 낭수대당 무인이 술량을 되지 삼단다지 강할레 시행실을 뛰네 직직을 뛰네 용거 바디도 무인이 술라 고 아주 풍보대에는 샬레 뛰네 주되게 뛰네 여바 차고라 강가세데 샬레 뛰네 쉐간드신의 시행실을 뛰네 여바 차 무인이 술디자대로 다양한 삼문나려야 낭수들 받나에도 디네 그런 원 현실에마도 그런 원에 두바시 나도 그래 제자대 낭수디 당무인이 순이디 미팅 받자대로 거든 디네게 무인이 수디 낭투스 간데 낭두스 베가서 디삼로디 장제 낭수디 야공어지 하고 와지 하고네 디는 무인이 술 나와 나신지 다가리도 레미도 제바치도 지상 무인이 술래 현실을 뛰는 주바마다다 마뛰는 주바지 가해 민도 선배게 삼례도 오다디 낭수디 노트레시아스 나와 나신지 민도와 선배 삼기고라 지산 나와 나시 민도 선배다 디니게 나와 나신지다 민도 동바레시아 선배 다 디게 나와 나신 매바 돌라 매바다 체명해바 니도 데라 동바이도 로시고다디
What we are challenging here is this innate self-grasping or true grasping. That this innate in the sense it naturally arises. We don't need to force it, that we naturally think in this way. And so this comes, as I've said, this applies to everything we think about. We believe that how something appears as independent is how it exists. This relates to everything. But when we investigate by means of dependence arising, we will come to recognize, actually, it appears to me as if it is independent, but it's not. It's dependent on causes and/or it's mutually dependent. Therefore, the way it appears is not how it exists in reality. And this relates to everything. We usually talk about the self, but it's everything we think about. The way that it appears is not how it exists in reality. Appearance and reality are not in accordance. So when we come to this recognition, especially when we do so again and again to a wide number of phenomena, we recognize nothing exists in the way that it appears. It is all empty of existing the way that it appears. Appearance and reality are not in accordance. How things appear are not how they exist. They are empty of existing in the way they appear. This then is the wisdom realizing emptiness.
Dini da sumli na wana chi midwa simbe simle ngeba nya de dongba yi to. Dini to ba da dini karas ha go sene deshi na wa gang lai ma ko rong wen de ba na wa na shi yore simbe samlo di no tru re sha sta di ha mo no tru lo shi che sha sme da ko lo shi ba ha go to go. Dini in za da dang wi ni su di gang lai ma do rang wen de ba de midwa simbe samlo di pa ka je nu ba che che de 대시 나와나 요래 선배 진바디바 누버 총총주고 지다다 진바 중나 따와 미스레 다 따와 내용도 다 진바디 라지주바 진바디 마누 누버 총총주고 레지레 제자 디네자 디 동바니 겁나 다 지지데 된진 방그레세 디소디 디 람사 다 고와 점이 람상 거 메바 차두고 말에 디파 아주기 디네 나와나 민도 선배 로디 녜바 녜산데 디야네 야네 고메 가제가 누버 셔셔 조디 대시 나와나 요래 선배 진바디 누버 총총주를 마루고래 아니 간섬 질이야 디균에 게 메바 차송거든 된디니 만저기 디니게 동반님 원숨도 세야돼 또는도 되니 데 또야 되려야 내가 녀야 되려야 이제 원숨이 내가 녀봐서 용거 되니게 다 가실에 되니게 냠내 좀봐 똑바디 야 공원이 공동고 공야 누벌마 셔셔셔도 대시 진바디 누버 총총주도 되니 마 도시는 방루고 그래지 진짜 진바디 되니게 진바디 매용도 아니 네 대샤 공동하게 녀모 버게요 말해지래 그 자오고 매봐서로
When one gains this wisdom of, let's say, understanding emptiness, the impact is that you come to see that all I'm thinking about is mistaken. In the sense of what I'm thinking about does not exist in the way that it appears. Therefore, this innate true grasping is a wrong consciousness because it's mistaken about how it believes things to exist. It's a wrong consciousness. And therefore, this true grasping or self-grasping is a consciousness of ignorance. The way it believes things to exist is not how they actually exist in reality. Whereas my understanding of emptiness is in accordance with reality. Therefore, it is a wisdom. And as with every single topic of meditation presented, these need to be engaged in repeatedly over a sustained period. The same meditation again and again and again with every topic of meditation. Why? So that the outcome of that meditation becomes ingrained within. You become habituated to it. This new way of thinking, this correct way of thinking becomes a part of your natural way of thinking. So too here, by meditating on emptiness repeatedly over a sustained period, one's conviction in the validity of one's understanding grows. And the impact of that understanding on you grows. Then how is this experienced? It's primarily experienced not so much that one's ignorance is weakening, but the afflictions that result from the weakening ignorance. It's these weakening afflictions, it's that you will experience. Your attachment, your anger, your pride, these will be weakening because what you attach to doesn't exist in the way that it appears. You who are attached do not exist in the way that it appears. The mind of attachment itself, it also doesn't exist in the way that it appears. So this understanding, this wisdom, leads to all these wrong consciousnesses weakening. Therefore, one's attachment, anger, pride, so forth, all weaken. And this comes from the weakening ignorance. And by continuing with this meditation, Not saying, oh, I've got something on top, fantastic. Not being satisfied, not being content, but continuing. Eventually the time will come when you realize emptiness directly. Then ignorance and the resulting afflictions and their seeds are being eliminated. And this is when one is rapidly gaining freedom.
Chỉ súc tông ba yo la ro súc tông ba yin bi kim sen súc se tông ba wo se de su de gang lai ma de rang wen de zhu ba de tông ba de da de tông ba wo se de jia lo le yin bi kim sen ga de se ne su de gu dan jian xian de dui de zhu ba de wa se.
Again, looking at the Heart Sutra from this morning, there are a couple of lines that are particularly famous. So looking at this expression, form is empty, followed by emptiness is form. So looking at the first, form is empty. So form is the illustration, form is empty. But let's make it into a sentence. Form is empty of being independent. And this word independent here can be expressed in many ways, but for our purposes, form is empty of being independent. That's all.
제자다 숙동바워서 숙요 말에서 숙매와 레세디 고고말 수요로 와다 가서 하고 고고로 수요에 바로 와다 가서 숙베지다 제자 숙동바워서디 수디 강라에 마다 랑원은 주바데 말에 랑원은 주베티 동바레에서 숙동바워서 디식으로 와다.
So wherever in the Heart Sutra one sees this negative, no or non, where it's mainly no, it doesn't mean non-existent, but it rather means does not exist in the way that it appears. So in this case, form is empty. It doesn't mean form is non-existent, because emptiness doesn't mean non-existent. It means it's empty of existing in the mistaken way that we believe it does. It's empty of being independent, not it does not exist.
한수 동보 다 동바니 수소라라 다 동바니 그런 수소식도와 제자다 강라에 마루와 한원의 주변 동바 그런 수그레 러고 말와 수 말와 아드믹 통해 수 있는 라바 차야 or 통해 거면 수 말와 제자다 돈다 베진날 같이 가서 동 동보 사실 라서비치 송서비치리아 동바니 수소라 동바니 그런 수그레 사실 송거와 레세데 동바니 수소제 동바니 수그레세데 돈다 가르송 것은 제가 동바니 세디 수 강라에 마 랑원의 주변 동바 그런 다 동바니지 디수기 랑신제에서다 수기 랑신 수기 뭐라 무인이슬 간이시에서는 데네 샹실에 마되바 랑원의 주변 동바를 해야돼서 수기 랑신 디에서 동바니 수소제디 제가 강라에 마되바 랑원의 주변 동바 마주 동바디 다 수기 랑신 무인이슬 디에서.
So form is empty then means form is empty of being independent. It doesn't mean non-existence. And likewise with all the nons throughout the sutra. Then the second phrase, emptiness is form. So again, this isn't to be taken literally. It's not that emptiness is form. Form is form. A hand or an arm, this is form. It is not emptiness. So then what does emptiness is form mean? It means that the very nature of form is emptiness, in that it is empty of existing independently. So the nature of form is emptiness, not that form itself is emptiness.
미메 나오메 남메 제메 세야데 돈다 차상 가르 돈다 가르소스 메메 세야데 강라에 모두와 랑응은 주비디 요마레 랑응은 주비 동바레 세지 디송거다 제자디 가르스네 메 랑응은 주바데 강라 모두 랑응은 주바데 메비 김선 가르스네 강라 모두와 레미도와 규단 젠레 되는 주구도와 제자 니샹레 되는 주구도와 샹레 되는 주바인자다 강라 모두바데 마레 세지.
Therefore, Or furthermore, throughout the Heart Sutra, whenever you see a no or none, it doesn't mean it's non-existent, but it means it is not independent. It's not self-existent. It doesn't exist from its own side by way of its own characteristics. Rather, the way it exists is interdependently or dependent on causes. It is a dependent arising. That's how it exists. It is not independent.
On the Nigida, Tombani, some night deduction, Chesa Tindig and Namja, some time deduction, Kumburi, some time in it, Tombani, Toyalia, Tablam, some data, that Rick Monguyore, we have been an the Nigi Tindig and Namja, some time that the Anzulia and Chictum de the Yaga Chick, Deletin and rushing in Matuba, Toyalia, Yungures or the Tindig and Namja.
Hopefully, in this way, you've come to some understanding of what is meant by emptiness. And this method of dependent arising is the most frequently used method to come to understand the meaning of emptiness or come to realize emptiness. There are many other methods that one can also use to come to understand emptiness, but dependent arising is the clearest.
Adinigi, depending on the Jazadang to dinner tabares, depending on Shavan, Chiki, in Kishile, some tabena, Kidige, and the Gabore, Nabore, said some tabena, and the Ki Gabos Nabachi, New York, the Gabore, T Nabore, like what you keep Chibuchia, Jobutapia, in Bachilia, Chipu Gabo Yovachi, Chipu Nabo Yovachi. Chesnadi, Kikabore, Dick Nabore, like 지상한주게 따야 돼 가르쳐서 거기 키디게 부디 분도 데 까보 여번사 어디 키디 까보래서 지상 분도 까보 여비기 될 때네 키디를 키 까보서 미다마 봐 다키 전다지기 고 분도디 나고가 가도 나고 여베 될 때네 어디 키 나고서 미다고 봐 지상 디니기 권한주기 분도기 될 때네 키디를 까보다 나고서 다 지상 키 까보 요하다 나보셔야지 그 수부기 분도기 될 때네 까보 나고서 다그러마도 만족이 될 마도 봐다 다메르와 또 다그러와.
This further illustration of mutual dependency. If you think of your dog at home, you'll ascribe a color to it. You'll say it's a black dog or a white dog or whatever. But that it is of this color is not a characteristic of that dog. Rather, it's merely the color of its fur. It's because the fur happens to be a particular color, we can label that dog, we can call that dog black or white. So therefore, the dog only can be called a particular color, independence on something, independence on the color of its fur.
제사단 기가보다 나고니디 그 분도라 마되바지 기코롱니가 직디 랑신 요코롱 가워지 지 랑신게 나고 죽되어이나 다 아니 분도데 매바나 지가보다 지 나보를 나오로와 그러다 분도 매반 제사 지부지간 저거 잡견 체중 지부지간 속다 지부지간 임바지라 지가보 나고니디 니가 부차자 자마 쇠세 균이 매바 쇠신 파셔 샤세 난 아니 지가보다 그게 지 나보다 그게라나 부고라면 누가 가르치가는데 갈라오르데 기가버디레 티나고를 라도야 말와다 제자디 가르세네 키코롱 키나고레세디 키코롱 나고데 랑고 응원에 나고 주용 주 매바다다 가서 풍부들레 뛰네 분도들레 뛰네 고 나고 따바레마도 키코롱 랑 키나고세디 코롱 응원에 랑 응원에 키나고 주 매바레 기가버데 콩 분도레 뛰네 고 까버레 기가버 따바마도 키코롱 응원에 안에 기가버 주 매바레 지난 코롱 외에 주비어바네 부차자 샤샤 장마자자 쇠제 파샤샤네 이게 지부지게 통되고로와 안티키가 버리키 나버려서 요말와다 제가 대고 랑고 외에 주비어바네 다가랑 까고 찍디 나고 되고로와 이 요말와다 제가디 매야도네 랑고 외에 나고 오다 까병 오 마주바 임바지 샹지 뛰는 주바 임바데 세보든지 다고도 그러와다.
And if you have two identical dogs, one just happens to be black and one happens to be white. If you were to completely shave those dogs so that they are entirely bald, you would not be able to tell which was black or white. You'd have to wait for some fur to grow through. And so this shows the color of the dog is not the dog. It's not in its nature. It's not black or white in dependence on its nature, due to its nature rather. It is rather an attribute that can only be labeled on dependence on a valid reason, that it is the color of the fur. Otherwise, if this weren't the case, one would know that that dog is black without being black at all. And that is not the case.
Da danda la da janju semba namji nam jamlen jige zue dangbo ne deji jamni je kunlo sam ta den janju semyu kunye la den jimbe nyamlen da chuje suebe nyamlen den ge tinghe shine zhuya la soba jin dongba ye sam da di nyamlen je da dangbo ko jamni je jimba chuje suebe nyamlen je den goro de den nyamlen je den nyamlen je sebe je la ya dongba ni gom den dongba ni ka ma ka ze gom na ka ko Bendigo kom ya den ba chu da ya jimbe nyam le sui be nyam le zun zhe nyam le du che che ya du xin dong ba jiu du xin ko ra che ge ni ga gong gu gong gu chen zhu ho le ya ge dang go le den xin de san yu go ba to tu go le che le.
The way to cultivate bodhicitta, I think I've presented clearly, training through the 3 levels. And then when one comes to the 3rd level, one trains in the recognizing the mutual dependency or the interdependency we have with others, love and compassion, wholehearted resolve, and bodhicitta. And then with bodhicitta arisen, one meditates on those 6 perfections of generosity up to wisdom. The way the bodhisattva will meditate on those 6 perfections is in a particular sequence. They'll meditate first on generosity, and then they'll meditate on emptiness in relation to generosity. Then they'll meditate on ethics. Then they'll meditate on emptiness in relation to ethics, and so forth. So in this way, the bodhisattva will meditate on the 6 perfections in a particular sequence, with the preceding ones always being meditated on first alone and then followed by emptiness.
Da ngara zu yin da de shu ba na ji de da de ke semja tham je ko we dong la zhe hu sem bi de ni ge ko we ju juan to de ni semja tham je ko de le ko we dong la zhe hu de semja ji de wa de ba shu sem bi ge de ne semja dong la zha wa shu sa de ne semja tham je ko we dong la zha wa de ngi chi yin si bi la sam je de ne semja tham je san yu ko ba to ba shu sem bi ge de ni ge sam ra ta de ni sam da we to ne da so so ra ge o da ngi 심지어 산요고바 토바치 디던달이야 능이 류롱제 계속的제바탐 지현이야 당기 선배기 되네 동의 선발 차야 돼. 되네 자 되네 아니 안지게 류가 있으면 그네 샤는 뇌배 자와 자오기는 지금에 새벽에 되네게 아니 출임소야. 되네게 아니 아지 생기 뇌바 제반 될이야 콩로랑 파 뇌len지에게 두시네 자오기는 지금에 새벽에 냠len지야. 되네 아니지 되네게 개회 냠는 제야도 빼야 버려 선배기다 모두 지긴 선배기 도신의 존재 삼다 도시 냠는 제야 되는 아주게 띵이지 다 가브리엘이야 지금 당한테 신내로 응원을 더 매나야 가브리엘이야 어느 사기 고다 되네게 삼다 제바 제지도 제 샹가야 삼마다 되네게 제지도 제바 되네 삼다야다 내 가브리엘이야 안 되네게 삼다네 가브리엘이야 아주기다 어다 라시아 간데시나 면적이 대화이나래 동화이나래 차산대서 균아 긴 현실에 되는 줍되와 마도 현실에 마도 바랑고 거는 줍되와 자오기니 매 선배게 당아세야디야 나세야당 아니 랑아라 현세 수인에 현실에 되는 줍바 마도 현실에 마도 바랑고 거는 줍바 자오기니 매 소소 삼나 나선나래 강래 마도 랑고들 난구여디 나수 노주리 선배게 되니게 랑고 거는 줍바 강래 마도 바랑고 거는 줍바 대사오기니 매아 선배 삼단에 동반이고 돼서 삼단거로 어두시네 저게 삼단 디수 삼는 되게 제 안에 안에 장 디네치네 김체로 제 된되게 남자 삼는데 김체로 소소하고 뒤주유리 직대비 김체인데 가르가르 뛰고 가는게 뛰고 집 뛰비 김체 삼다는 된되게 남자되게 도시는 자고로 어두시 삼다에 되게 당한 저기다 냠년 제세야 되는 도시네 삼단 강도도 제도네 당한 저기 다 직계저 사야다 아니 디보 보야다 디네 자고로
And for those who have the opportunity to keep the Dharma at the forefront of their mind, meditate in the way presented, starting where we are at the beginning. For those who do not currently have the opportunity to keep the Dharma at the forefront of their mind throughout the day, then meditate in the way presented yesterday. And if time is limited, I encourage you to meditate nevertheless every day, but sometimes you can make it a little shorter, sometimes a little longer. So meditate on the faults of samsara, so as to give rise to a wish to gain freedom of samsara. This is important not to miss, to meditate on the sufferings of samsara, and then to give rise to definite emergence. Then turn your attention, recognizing all others are in the same position, and through reflecting on our interconnected relationships with them, develop a sense of closeness. If time is limited, then you can just repeat the next stages as a mere expression: love, compassion, wholehearted resolve, and bodhicitta, and then spend a little bit more time on the 4 meditations of generosity, ethics, patience, and enthusiastic perseverance, and then dedicate. But if you have then a little more time, then you can spend more on, say, love, compassion, and so forth. Or you can also spend a bit of time on single points of concentration and the wisdom realizing emptiness. But these 2 really need repeated, perhaps a full-time attention to actually lead to a transformative result. But if from time to time you want to strengthen your concentration, try and hold a Buddha image. And from time to time, if you want to meditate on emptiness, remind yourself, happiness comes about in dependence on causes. It's not self-existent or independent. So too with suffering. And even just that, you can use to spur you to strive in virtue and abandon non-virtue. Remind yourself, I, as well as others, are not self-existent, but we are interdependent. And we do not exist by way of our nature or characteristics, but are empty of existing in this way. So reminding oneself of the presentation on emptiness through reflecting on dependence arising from time to time is beneficial. But if your time is limited, focus on those first four practices rather, as well as then what comes before that.
참 되네기 돼서 참 되서게 강바 안 되래 제리체게 안지게 제리체게래 안직진 어도신에 차상을 뛰고 대술을 뛰네 뛰고 그래 되네 참 튀게나 대술 뛰고 그래 되네기 뛰지 않게 참 돼야지 되네기 뛰어발래 되느라고 그래 제사다야 지게 참 튀게나 참되게 고지체게다 참돼서 강보르지 여베이나 아디 델이야 안 참되겐지 미지 말아봐나 야지 참 요거 말 제가 되게 참돼야지 참되게 미다 직되어 유겐 미라고 그래 되네자 아주게 참돼야지 되니 뛰고라 진짜 되네자 뒤뛰어발래 되네다 대 아주게 참 지고지체게 돼 아니 참치게 돼 아니 경험주게 되네기 참되게 돼 되게 뒷받쳐 참 용어지. 내가 되네 되네 아니래 되네기 취시시하고 합치라지. 지상 알아서 차상이야. 안 되네기 개화주게 돼 아주 좀 되게다 이마 가시린 양아 차상기 경어도 되네 이민행가 돼 참도 두시네. 개화 사바래 아니 그 되니 돼서 제시해지네 개화 사. 지상 개화디 개화 차선 디 두야디 유단 게임 망보제래 되네. 누르트가 차기도 하다 되네기 되네. 이마고 뒤쪽에 제가 되네 인자다 안주기 개버 될 때네 양 현달에 판도 요리와 차고로 주투고로 제가 되네 상아주 개버 될 때네 아주 상계의 탈바 탐지기 먹고 토투의 규사와서 마음받는 될 유 기계기 고반토야기 유차고로 인자다 아주 개버 사샤바디 나는 아주 내가 아주 지구 마인바 안에 샘제 탐제 안에 점내는 게 내암다 안에 추서라서 봐 심지한테 동아 탐제시 심지한 탐제 대기대 lui tiwa de semba jiwo ya da anes je semje tamji gele jamni ji samlo de ya kwani ko do peje ne digi de tembo yong sho sembege denigi nga zu kewa de ne gyur wa sho sembege denigi andam malam jare ngo ja ngo malam to session ji ko da.
Now the impermanence of our time together is very vividly clear. We come right now to the very end of our time together. This opportunity to cultivate virtue is finite and it is ending. So, like that, we be aware once again of impermanence. And everything that is impermanent is dependent on causes. So we can remind ourselves of dependence arising. And in these times together, right now in this session, we've spoken a bit about dependent arising. So we can take this as our lens to review the retreat very briefly. In each session that you've had here, not just in the teaching sessions, in the meditation sessions, you've accumulated extensive merit. This merit or virtuous karma that you have accumulated is a dependent arising. It didn't just happen. It didn't happen because it has a particular nature. It happened in dependence on many causes. That this very retreat happened required innumerable causes, countless causes. It requires qualified retreat leaders, requires retreatants. So all of us have this interdependent relationship. I could only teach you because you were here wanting to be taught. I could only teach you because of causes I have created. Venerable Tsepel could only lead her meditations in dependence on so many causes she has created. And each of you are only here in dependence on many causes that you have created. But even these creation of causes that each person has individually created didn't come about in dependence on you alone, but interdependently with so many others. Our individual teachers, people in our lives, our employers, and so forth. Moreover, having someone who can lead a retreat and retreatants, that those causes, those innumerable causes are insufficient. You need a place to gather, a place that is comfortable, that is protected from the environment. And for that to come about, there have been decades of causes directly accumulated and countless indirect causes as well. Those who've offered their time, their energy, their financial support to make this place possible and to ensure that it has survived for all these decades. And then we can think in many other ways, but we'll leave at just these clearest ways in how we are interdependent, how we are entwined. Ourselves here as this little group, and through each of us connected to our own larger groups outside, who are all in their own various ways entwined with each one of us individually. In this way, we come to recognize this deep web of interdependency. And that this virtue that we have accumulated now has come about in dependence on so many others. It's not me making everything happen. It's come about in dependence on so many others. So now, in a few moments, we'll come to dedicate. When you dedicate all this virtue, dedicate it to everyone who has been involved in making this retreat possible, those directly and those indirectly. When one really has thought well about dependence arising, that expression of dedicating the merit accumulated in this retreat to all those who made the retreat possible means you are dedicating the virtue to the well-being of every single being. Every single being. The web of interdependency is vast and very fine. So we dedicate that all beings fulfill their potential and become Buddhas. And that all beings strive, ourselves and all others, to quickly fulfill our potential so that we can be of benefit to others. And in this process of fulfilling our potential, may we only ever benefit and never harm, benefit in all ways we can and never harm. And in this process, may all beings live in good health, heal from illness. In particular, may their minds, no matter what they are encountering, be at peace. May all beings live in comfort, free from material distress and emotional distress. May all beings live free of conflict and aggression, whether from others or from arising in their own minds. May all beings live in peace.
Dene zada anjuge denigi da ngara samde be yabu chungson sembegida susulya semlia kawa komchedin maada ma susana nalma lori odirin da dene samde gecho yabu sayara son sembegida susu kawa komchidroya de chagorwa odene shi da tushi.
I personally want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of you. And I really appreciate the opportunity you have given me by being here. And again, I'm really expressing this not just to those in the room, but broadly. And I encourage you to think in the same way, to recognize this deep web that we have with all beings and rejoice in the good we have done and through our dedication, the good that will come to all. And thank you.
Yeah.